I'll never forget the sound of my stepmother's champagne glass hitting our mahogany dining table that Christmas evening. The crystal made this sharp, decisive sound, like a judge's gavel coming down on a death sentence. Francine stood at the head of the table, right where my father used to carve the turkey every Christmas for the past 30 years. Her red silk dress caught the light from the chandelier, making her look like she was wrapped in blood. "This house is mine now," she declared, her ruby red lips curving into a smile that made my blood run cold. "You children get nothing." The words hung in the air like poison. My sister Bethany grabbed my hand under the table, her fingers trembling so hard I could feel her pulse racing through her palm. My brother Conrad's jaw clenched so tight I thought he might shatter his teeth. The Christmas dinner we'd been forcing ourselves through suddenly felt like a trap we'd walked right into. "What are you talking about?" Conrad's voice was low, dangerous. He'd inherited our father's temper along with his strong jaw and work-worn hands. As a firefighter, he was used to running into danger, not away from it, and I could see him calculating his next move. Francine took a slow sip of her champagne, savoring our shock like it was the finest wine. "Your father signed everything over to me before he died. The house, the 3 hardware stores, the investment accounts, even your mother's jewelry that's been sitting in that safe upstairs. It's all legally mine." Bethany made a sound like someone had punched her in the stomach. She was only 29. The baby of the family, and still wore the pearl necklace Dad had given her for her nursing school graduation just 2 years ago. "You're lying. Dad would never do that to us." "Wouldn't he?" Francine pulled out a manila folder from her designer purse, the same gaudy gold-clasped thing Dad had bought her on their honeymoon to Vegas. "It's all here in black and white, notarized and witnessed. Your father realized I deserved everything after taking care of him these last 2 years." The dining room felt like it was spinning. This house, our childhood home, had been in our family since Dad bought it as a young man with big dreams and empty pockets. He'd built his hardware store empire from nothing, working 18-hour days while our mother raised us in these rooms. Every doorframe had pencil marks tracking our height. Every wall held pictures of family milestones. The kitchen still smelled like Mom's apple pie recipe that she'd taught us before cancer took her 10 years ago. "Taking care of him?" I heard myself say, my voice sounding strange and distant. "You mean spending his money on shopping sprees and convincing him to change his heart medication?" Francine's eyes flashed dangerously. "Careful, Melody. Slander is a serious accusation. Besides, you're a teacher. You should understand the importance of legal documents." She was right about one thing. I was. A teacher, had been for 8 years at Riverside Elementary. I taught 3rd grade, spent my days teaching kids about fairness and honesty and sharing. The irony wasn't lost on me that while I was teaching other people's children these values, my father's new wife was apparently plotting to steal our entire inheritance. "Get out!" Conrad stood up, his 6'2" frame casting a shadow across the table. "Get out of our father's house right now!" "Your father's house?" Francine laughed, and it was an ugly sound. "Oh, honey, you really aren't listening. This is my house now, and if anyone's leaving, it's you 3. In fact, I want you all out by New Year's Day. That gives you a week to pack up whatever personal items you think you deserve, though technically, even those belong to me now." That's when we heard it. The doorbell, cutting through the tension like a knife. We all froze. Who would be coming by on Christmas evening in the middle of a snowstorm? Francine frowned, clearly not expecting anyone. "If that's one of your friends coming to plead your case, they're wasting their time." But when I opened that heavy oak door, the last person I expected to see was standing there. Theodore Ashford, our father's lawyer for the past 20 years, looking grim and determined, snow gathering on his coat shoulders, holding a briefcase and something else that would change everything we thought we knew about our father's death. The Brennan family had always gathered at our childhood home for Christmas, ever since Dad bought the Victorian house on Maple Street 30 years ago. He'd just opened his first hardware store then, barely had 2 nickels to rub together, but he'd promised Mom they'd have a real home to raise their family. The house had good bones, he'd said, just needed some love and elbow grease. Over the years, he'd restored every inch of it with his own hands, teaching us kids how to hammer nails and sandwood along the way. This was supposed to be our first Christmas without him. Dad had passed away 3 months earlier, September 15th, a massive heart attack in his office at the main store. He was only 58 years old, still strong, still full of plans for expansion and retirement trips he'd never take. The funeral had been packed with people whose lives he'd touched, customers who'd become friends, employees who'd become family. Everyone except Francine had cried that day. "Melody, pass the cranberry sauce," Bethany whispered from across the table, trying to maintain some normalcy in what felt like a stage play of a family dinner. She'd driven 3 hours from the children's hospital where she worked, still wearing her candy cane scrub top under her sweater. The dining room felt different without Dad's booming laugh filling the space, without him insisting we all try the new recipe he'd found in some cooking magazine at the dentist's office. His chair at the head of the table sat empty. Francine had insisted we leave it, that way out of respect, though she'd already moved into the master bedroom and redecorated half the house. Gone were Mom's handmade curtains, replaced with expensive blinds that blocked out too much light. The family photos in the hallway had been swapped for modern art that Dad would have called expensive nonsense. Conrad hadn't said much since arriving that afternoon. As the eldest at 35, he'd taken Dad's death the hardest. He'd been working at the fire station when the call came in, had actually responded to the emergency at Dad's store before realizing whose life was slipping away. "Remember when Dad used to make us all share what we were grateful for?" he said quietly, staring at his untouched turkey. "Even that year I was 17 and angry at everything. He still made me participate. He said gratitude was like oil in an engine," I added, smiling at the memory. "Keeps everything running smooth even when parts want to break down." Francine clinked her fork against her wine glass, the sound sharp and commanding. "Well, I have something to share with you all." Her voice had that artificial sweetness that always set my teeth on edge, like saccharin trying to masquerade as sugar. She'd been Dad's secretary at the main store for only 6 months before they started dating. We'd all been shocked when he introduced her as his girlfriend at Bethany's 27th birthday party 2.5 years ago. Francine was 30 years younger than Dad, with bleached blonde hair and nails that were always perfectly manicured, never chipped from actual work. None of us had understood what Dad saw in her. She seemed more interested in his credit cards than his company, more fascinated by his bank statements than his stories. The wedding had been quick, too quick. A courthouse ceremony we weren't invited to, finding out through a Facebook post from Francine's cousin. Dad had apologized later, said Francine wanted something intimate, just the two of them. Mom would have been heartbroken to know he'd remarried without his children present. "Your father and I had many conversations before he passed," Francine continued, standing up from her chair like she was giving a presentation to a board of directors. The candlelight caught her diamond earrings, gifts from Dad last Christmas when we'd all still been pretending this could work, that we could be some kind of blended family. She walked around the table slowly, deliberately, her heels clicking on the hardwood floors Dad had refinished himself the summer I turned 16. We talked about this house, about his assets, about the future. He had very specific wishes about how things should be handled after his death. The turkey suddenly tasted like sawdust in my mouth. Bethany set down her fork, and Conrad's hands curled into fists on either side of his plate. The Christmas music playing softly from the living room stereo seemed to mock us with its cheerful melodies about family and home, and joy. "Francine, if this is about Dad's will, we should discuss it with Mr. Ashford present," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What are you talking about, Francine?" I asked, though my stomach was already dropping like I'd stepped off a cliff. The Christmas dinner that had already felt strained now felt like a carefully laid trap, and we'd walked right into it with our guards down. She pulled out a document from her designer purse, the papers crisp and official looking. "Your father signed everything over to me a month before he died. The house, the stores, the investments, the vacation cabin up at Lake Harrison, even the classic Mustang in the garage that Conrad helped restore. Everything." "That's impossible." Conrad stood up so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood floor, leaving marks Mom would have scolded him for. Dad would never leave us with nothing. He spent his whole life building that business for our family's future. "He would, and he did," Francine interrupted, waving the papers like a winning lottery ticket. I have it all here in black and white. Power of attorney, transfer of assets, deed to the house, ownership papers for all 3 hardware stores. This house is mine now. The businesses are mine. And you, children, she paused, savoring the moment like expensive chocolate. You get nothing. Bethany's face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. But Dad promised us. He always said the house would stay in the family. Our mom grew up in this house. Her parents built it in 1962. This is where she learned to cook, where she met Dad at a neighborhood barbecue, where she wanted her grandchildren to play someday. Your mother is dead, Francine said coldly, each word deliberate and cutting. She's been dead for 10 years, and now so is your father. It's time you all faced reality and stopped living in the past. You're lying, I said, my voice shaking with rage I couldn't contain. Dad had a will. He showed it to us last Thanksgiving, right in his study. We were all provided for. He'd split everything equally between the 3 of us, with provisions for any grandchildren. He even set aside money for Bethany to open her own pediatric practice someday. Plans change, sweetheart. Francine's smile was predatory, like a snake who'd cornered a mouse. Your father realized I deserved everything after taking care of him. You 3 are adults with your own careers. Conrad makes good money as a firefighter. Bethany has her nursing job, and you, Melody, well, teachers might not make much, but you get summers off. You don't need his money. Conrad's fists were clenched so tight his knuckles had gone white. Taking care of him? You mean spending his money on spa treatments and designer clothes? Parading him around town like your personal ATM? Convincing him to skip his cardiology appointments because you had dinner reservations at the country club? Watch your tone, Francine snapped, her composed mask finally cracking. I can have you all removed from my property right now. One phone call to the sheriff's department and you'll be spending Christmas in a holding cell for trespassing. This is insane, I said, standing up to face her. Dad built everything he had for family. He worked 70-hour weeks, missed vacations, saved every penny so we could have better lives. He wouldn't just give it all to someone he'd known for 2 years. 2.5 years, Francine corrected, as if those 6 months made any difference. And clearly you didn't know your father as well as you thought. He was lonely after your mother died. You 3 had your own lives, barely visited except for holidays. I was there every day. I earned this. Earned it? Bethany's voice broke through her tears. You isolated him from his friends, convinced him to fire Margaret, who'd been his office manager for 15 years, made him miss Conrad's commendation ceremony at the fire department because you wanted to go to wine country instead. Francine walked over to the window, gazing out at the snow-covered yard where our swing set still stood, rusty, but strong. You can contest it if you want. Waste your money on lawyers. But these documents are ironclad. Your father was of sound mind. The transfers are all legal, and frankly, no judge is going to overturn a man's decision to provide for his wife. The room felt like all the oxygen had been sucked out. 3 generations of Brennan family history, hundreds of thousands of dollars in assets, our childhood home, our father's legacy, all stolen by a woman who couldn't even spell the word inventory when she'd started working at the store. Just as I thought Conrad might actually flip the table or put his fist through the wall, the doorbell rang, its cheerful chime completely at odds with the devastation in the room. I opened the door to find Mr. Theodore Ashford standing in the snow, briefcase in hand, his usually cheerful face stern and determined. Snow had gathered on the shoulders of his dark wool coat, and his breath formed clouds in the freezing air. Behind him, the streetlights cast long shadows across our front yard, the same yard where Dad had taught us to throw a baseball. Mr. Ashford? I said, confused and somehow hopeful at the same time. What are you doing here? It's Christmas night. Hello, Melody. I apologize for interrupting your holiday, but this couldn't wait. He stepped inside, brushing snow from his coat with practiced efficiency. His eyes were sharp behind his wire-rimmed glasses, the same eyes that had helped Dad navigate 30 years of business deals. Is everyone here, including Mrs. Brennan? Francine appeared in the hallway, her red dress swooshing as she walked, her face already shifting from surprise to calculation. Theodore, what's the meaning of this? We weren't expecting you. Francine, he nodded curtly, barely acknowledging her. It was the first time I'd ever seen him be anything less than professionally courteous to anyone. I need to speak with all of you. It's about Robert's estate, and it cannot wait another day. There's nothing to discuss, Francine said quickly, her voice rising half an octave. Robert left everything to me. I have the documents right here, all perfectly legal, all properly witnessed. You should know. You've seen them yourself. Yes, I'm aware of the documents you had Robert sign, Mr. Ashford said, his tone sharp as a blade. However, there's something else, something Robert asked me to keep safe until the right moment, with very specific instructions about when to reveal it. We all gathered back in the living room, the Christmas tree lights twinkling mockingly in the corner. The presents underneath it seemed like props in a play now, wrapped boxes full of nothing that mattered anymore. Mr. Ashford set his briefcase on the coffee table Mom had bought at an estate sale and refinished herself, back when she was healthy enough to take on such projects. Conrad moved to stand behind Francine's chair, not threatening but definitely blocking her path to the door. Bethany sat next to me on the couch, still clutching the tissue she'd been using to wipe her tears. The room smelled like pine needles and cinnamon candles, scents that should have meant comfort and home, but now felt like a funeral parlor. 3 days before Robert died, he came to my office. Mr. Ashford began, pulling out a tablet from his briefcase. It was a Tuesday morning, very early before the stores opened. He was distressed, more upset than I'd ever seen him in 20 years of friendship and professional relationship. This is ridiculous, Francine interjected, but her voice had lost some of its earlier confidence. Robert never mentioned visiting you that week. There's quite a bit Robert didn't mention to you, Francine, Mr. Ashford replied coolly. He asked me to record something, a video message, and to only share it if certain circumstances arose. He was very specific about those circumstances. The lawyer looked directly at Francine, his gaze unflinching. Those circumstances were, and I quote Robert directly here, if Francine tries to claim everything and leave my children with nothing, show them the truth. Those circumstances have now occurred. This is harassment. Francine started to stand, but Conrad placed a firm hand on her shoulder. Sit down, he said firmly. We're all going to watch this, every second of it. You can't force me to stay here, Francine protested, but her voice was shaking now. This is my house. I'll call the police. Please do, Mr. Ashford said calmly, pulling out his phone. In fact, I can call them myself if you'd prefer. I'm certain they'd be very interested in what Robert had to say in this video. The room went silent except for the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the same clock Dad wound every Sunday night without fail for 30 years. Francine sank back into her chair, her face pale beneath her carefully applied makeup. Mr. Ashford positioned the tablet so we could all see the screen clearly. Before I play this, I need you all to know that I've already filed copies of this video with the probate court, the state attorney's office, and my own firm's senior partners. Robert wanted to make sure there were no questions about its authenticity or admissibility. He pressed play, and my father's face filled the screen. The sight of him, alive and talking just days before we lost him, made my chest tighten with fresh grief and sudden, desperate hope. Dad's face appeared on the screen, and Bethany gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. He looked tired, older than I remembered from just 3 months ago, with dark circles under his eyes and a gray pallor to his skin. But his eyes were clear and determined, the same eyes that had watched us take our first steps, graduate from college, become adults. My dear children, Melody, Conrad, Bethany, if you're watching this, it means Francine has revealed her true nature. His voice was steady but filled with a sadness that broke my heart all over again. I need you to know the truth, the whole truth, before it's too late. Francine's face had gone pale, her red lipstick standing out like blood against white paper. Turn it off. This is fake. He was sick, delirious. Nothing he says matters. Shut up, Conrad said, his firefighter's authority cutting through her protests. Dad continued, shifting slightly in his chair. I recognized the background as Mr. Ashford's office, the law books lined up behind him like silent witnesses. 6 weeks ago, I discovered Francine has been slowly poisoning me. Small doses of digitalis in my coffee every morning, enough to weaken my heart, but not enough to raise suspicion during routine checkups. I found the vial hidden in her jewelry box when I was looking for cufflinks for the Chamber of Commerce dinner. My hand flew to my mouth. Bethany grabbed Conrad's arm so tight I could see her knuckles go white. The room started spinning, and I had to force myself to keep breathing, to keep listening. I confronted her privately that night. Dad's voice continued, each word measured and deliberate. At first she denied it. Then, when I showed her the vial, she laughed. She actually laughed and told me I could never prove it. Said the digitalis would metabolize too quickly, that it would look like my existing heart condition just got worse. She was right about that part. Dad paused, took a sip of water from a glass on Mr. Ashford's desk. Then she threatened that if I didn't sign over everything to her immediately, she'd increase the dose. She said no one would believe me anyway. An older man claiming his young, beautiful wife was trying to kill him? She said they'd think I was going senile, that I was jealous of her youth, that I was having delusions from my heart medication. "This is insane," Francine screamed, trying to stand. Again. But Conrad held her firmly in place. "He's lying. I loved Robert. I would never hurt him." Dad's expression on the video hardened into something I'd rarely seen. A cold fury that reminded me he hadn't built 3 successful stores by being soft. So I played along. I signed the papers she wanted, transferred the assets she demanded, but Theodore here helped me create a second set of documents. My real will, leaving everything as I always intended. To my 3 children, equal shares of all business assets, with the house to remain in the family trust. Francine gets exactly what she brought into this marriage, which is nothing. But more importantly, Dad leaned forward, looking directly into the camera. "I've been documenting everything. The digitalis she bought under a false name using a fake ID she had made at that sketch place on Highway 9. I have the receipts, the false medical records she created using my computer after she thought I was asleep. I have screenshots and timestamps. The life insurance policy she tried to take out on me without my knowledge, forging my signature. Theodore has everything needed to prove attempted murder and fraud." Mr. Ashford pulled a thick folder from his briefcase. "Everything Robert mentioned is in here. Receipt copies, photographs, audio recordings of conversations where Francine discussed her plans with someone on the phone, thinking Robert was asleep." The room was silent except for the sound of Dad's voice continuing, "Francine, if you're watching this, know that I've already contacted the police. Detective Morrison from the Major Crimes Unit has been investigating for the past month. They should be arriving shortly after this video ends. You probably thought you were so clever, so careful, but you forgot something important. The security system you insisted we install records audio as well as video. Every threat you made is preserved." As if on cue, we heard sirens in the distance, growing louder, closer. Through the front window, red and blue lights began painting patterns across the snow-covered lawn. Dad's face softened on the screen. "My dear children, I'm sorry for this deception. I needed to protect you and ensure justice. The doctor says the damage to my heart from the digitalis is extensive. I may not have long, maybe days, but I couldn't leave this world knowing she would get away with it, knowing she would steal your birthright and mock your mother's memory in the house she loved." 3 months later, I stood in Dad's study, now Conrad's office, watching the spring rain wash over the garden Mom had planted 20 years ago. The daffodils were blooming, bright yellow against the dark soil, proof that life keeps pushing forward even after the harshest winter. Francine had been convicted of first-degree murder and attempted murder, sentenced to life without parole. The trial revealed she'd done this before, to 2 other elderly husbands in different states, always with the same pattern of poison, papers, and false grief. "Hey," Bethany said, joining me at the window. She looked healthier now, the dark circles under her eyes finally fading. "Conrad's making Dad's famous chili for dinner. Extra beans, just how Dad liked it, even though we all complained." I smiled, remembering how Dad would defend his recipe against our protests every Sunday. Dad would like that we're all living here together again. He always said this house was too big for just 2 people. She nodded, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "You know what I can't stop thinking about? How Dad protected us even while he was dying. He could have just gone to the police immediately when he found the poison, but he knew Francine might hurt us or disappear with everything before they could build a case. He was always 10 steps ahead, I agreed, thinking about all those chess games he'd taught us as kids. Even at the end, he was still teaching us to think strategically. Conrad appeared in the doorway, holding an envelope that looked aged at the edges. Found something else in Dad's papers when I was organizing the store accounts. Letter for us. Want me to read it? We gathered on Dad's old leather couch, the one he'd bought secondhand and restored himself, refusing to replace it despite Mom's gentle suggestions. The leather was worn soft in all the places he used to sit, like his presence was still somehow pressed into the furniture itself. Conrad opened the letter carefully, his hand steady despite the emotion in his eyes. My beloved children, if you're reading this, justice has been served and you're safe. That's all that matters to me. Don't waste time on hatred or bitterness toward Francine or anyone else who tries to hurt our family. I've learned that life is shorter than we think and more precious than we know. The house isn't just walls and memories. It's where our family's love lives. Keep that love alive. Keep Sunday dinners going even when you don't feel like cooking. Keep laughing in the kitchen over burned pancakes and experimental recipes. Keep helping each other through hard times without keeping score. That's your real inheritance, not the money or the stores. Those are just tools to help you build good lives. Your mother understood this, and I hope I've taught it to you by example. All my love, Dad. Bethany wiped her eyes with her sleeve. He saved us one last time. No, Conrad said quietly, folding the letter carefully. He taught us to save ourselves, to trust each other, to fight for what's right, even when it seems impossible. That night, we ate chili at the same dining room table where our world had almost shattered. Dad's chair wasn't empty anymore because we'd started taking turns sitting there, each of us carrying forward a piece of his strength. We'd placed his photo on the mantel, surrounded by the flowers from Mom's garden, where he could watch over family dinners like he always had. The Victorian house still hosts our family Christmases, though they're different now. We invite Mr. Ashford every year, considering him family after everything he did to help Dad protect us. The hardware stores are thriving under Conrad's management, with Bethany handling the healthcare plans for employees, and me teaching weekend workshops for kids on basic home repair, just like Dad used to do. We have a new Christmas tradition now. Before dinner, we watch Dad's video, not the revelation about Francine, but another one Mr. Ashford gave us, where Dad simply tells stories about each of us as children, laughing at memories of our mishaps and adventures. It reminds us that love transcends death, that justice can prevail over greed, and that family is the only inheritance that truly matters. Sometimes the greatest gifts come disguised as the worst moments. Dad's final Christmas gift to us wasn't money or property. It was showing us that love and justice are stronger than greed and evil, and that sometimes the best revenge against those who try to tear families apart is simply staying together, stronger than before. If this story touched your heart or reminded you to cherish your own family while you can, please take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Comment below with your own stories of family strength and resilience. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful true stories that remind us of what really matters in life.